Thank you very much for inviting me here to speak. I'm excited to talk about how we're using our own products at Elastic. First, thank you very much to Paratis for hosting this event. It's a fabulous space, and enjoyed chatting with folks and getting to learn a bit more about your company and everything that you're doing. So with Elastic, I have been in the information risk, information security space for over 20 years. I've spent the last 5 years at Elastic building out the security program. I was in financial services before that. Many other startups in Silicon Valley before that. So I've seen a lot of different things. And what I tried to do coming at Elastic was coming in pretty greenfield. And so it was all of those experiences, all of those lessons that I always said, well, if I had the opportunity to do this again, I would not do it this way. I get to try to apply them at Elastic. And so a lot of challenges, a lot of fun. So here to share how we're doing that with our own products. But first, just to give a little bit of scope of what we cover. So information security at Elastic covers both the Elastic corporate services, business services, but also all of the customer environments. So everything from Elasticsearch Service and our cloud offerings, we focus on securing and ensuring that we're securing all of that. So we have a small centralized information security team and then distributed security responsibilities all throughout the organization. So we have about 3,000 elasticians across 42 countries. Cloud native implementation, most of our corporate services are running on SaaS. So we have a lot of data, availability of a lot of data to give us visibility. From a security perspective, we are ingesting about 150 terabytes of data a day, processing that. If you look holistically across all of our cloud service and the totality of the observability data, that's closer to about 600 gigabytes a day, all running in Elasticsearch. Have about 450,000 endpoints, and the very large majority of that is within our SaaS offerings. So we're operating at a pretty significant scale. Before we started using our projects and designing our overall program, we first really focused on how we want to operate. So for folks familiar with Elastic, if you've seen the Elastic source code that's out on our website, we took that, and from an information security program perspective, how do we want to apply the source code? What have we enjoyed? What have we not enjoyed from other organizations and experiences that we had? And how would we like to see a security program operate? So this is what we came up with, and just really focused on transparency, communication, innovation, and iteration is the underlying principles. So with that, I'll talk about how we're using our products in some of the core areas of an information security program. I'm going to go very high level, so I'm happy to answer questions or talk with anyone in more detail afterwards. So this is to give you a survey of some of the things that we've done with our products. Coming in, our overall goal is to run the entire information security program on the Elastic Stack. Just the flexibility, the scalability of the platform really provides you to apply some creativity and do really whatever you can imagine within the Elastic Stack. And then, of course, Elastic has made it a bit easier by developing some security solutions and making some acquisitions to get things like our endpoint security agent. So they've helped along the way as well. So I'll first focus on excuse me, the governance and compliance. So this is all the area where all of the compliance certifications that we need to receive, the control environment, the policies and standards for customers, the customer due diligence, so all the questionnaires, all the information that we need to share to help organizations know that we're securing their information and securing it sufficiently to meet their standards. And so the first part of that, many organizations deal with many different regulations, frameworks, and what we wanted to do, and many organizations have done this as well, is create a singular framework that we apply across the organization. So we call that, of course, the Elastic Controls Framework. And what that has done is just aggregate all of the frameworks, all of the regulations, so we can look at, this is the policy objective or the control objective for Elastic, and then we've got it mapped to it. It helps us meet ISO, it helps us ensure that we are meeting this regulation, and we have all of those mappings. But what that gives us within the overall program is just that base foundation. We can tie everything back to why we're doing it at Elastic. So every control objective has a why behind it, and really trying to explain, and part of the fundamental tenets of our program is we don't want to do security just for security's sake, and we really don't want to do compliance just for check the box. But what's the why? What's the real reasoning behind that? And doing it all within the stack. So with that Elastic Controls framework, we've written that as compliance as code, so taken the general framework, put it into Elastic Stack, manage it, just like code in GitHub. So as we make changes, check them in, get approval, so we have all of the history, all of the changes, so helps with auditors as well. They want to see the change. Nice GitHub change control. And then that feeds into everything else that we do within the program. And I'll touch on a few of the ones more specific to governance and compliance, but you'll see this thread all throughout the rest of the presentation as well. So first, the most basic, just looking at the content. So with all of our control objectives in there, using Kibana, basic search through it. And what we have is our control objectives, control statement. But each of our teams, so we have many different teams, they apply controls differently. And so we also understand, well, this is the control objective that we have, and here's how all of the different teams across Elastic are implementing it. And then we'll get down into, well, the controls, this is the monitoring, these are the metrics, so we can see how things are operating and if they're being effective. Second, all of those questionnaires, we love all of the customer questionnaires that we get. Some are very, very long, very, very time consuming. We as an information security organization can't answer all of them, so why not ask for help across the organization? So we created a data bank of questions, put it into our app search, and have opened that up across the company to self-service, find those answers, reach out and escalate to us if an answer is not in there that they're looking for, or if they have additional questions. But really being able to spread out the volume of activity. And for the folks that are closest to the customers, they're able to answer the questions that are much more relevant to the conversations that they're having. Similarly, on the product side, because our code is open, available for anyone on the internet, lots of customers, potential customers, take that code and run it through security scanners, so things like Sneak and Qualys vulnerability scanning, and they send us the reports and say we want a response for every single line item in this report. And sometimes there's many, many, many thousands of lines based on false positives and how some of the scanners work. And so similarly, we were responding to all of those manually, does not scale, cannot do that. So we pulled it all into Elasticsearch, created a data bank. Most of these questions come into our support team, so support now has access, and again, they only now escalate to us if there's something that doesn't have a response or if there's follow-up customer questions. And using workplace search as the underlying mechanism to provide this. Now getting back to more specifically, how are we applying those control objectives? So one is what we call continuous controls monitoring. It's just using the API and all of the data availability from our cloud-native implementations, whether that's bringing data from Salesforce and Slack and NetSuite, or data and logs from all of the hyperscalers that we use for our SaaS environments, so AWS, Azure, GCP. We bring all that data in, apply the perspective of what should this configuration look like, what should the setting be, and we have integrated as much automation as possible. So this screenshot here is an example of, we use Tines. So Elastic has a partnership with Tines, so we integrate with them for all of our orchestration, automation, our SOAR capabilities. And then we integrate a lot of that within Slack. So our goal is, we don't want analysts just staring at a dashboard, staring at a screen and just waiting for alerts and events. We want them focused on more critical thinking, analysis, investigations. And so what we do with our Slack, first we automate as much as we can and distribute out responses, and then we highlight what are the activities that we're seeing that need a bit more investigation and analysis. So this, for example, the AWS S3 bucket, try to send it to the owner. Say, is this something that you expected to see? And if not, then it comes up and gets tagged as an alert for an analyst to investigate. So we look at this as configurations. When we start to see configuration drift, when we start to see activity that isn't aligned with what this environment should be saying, all tied back to our control objectives. So moving into risk management, we, as with any organization, we do our risk management process from an information risk perspective, and then we apply the FAIR framework, so factor analysis of information risk, to quantify our risk and help us understand prioritization. So for those not familiar with FAIR, it uses statistical analysis with your data, understanding the strength of your control in the environment, the threat actors and their maturity and their skill set, And it provides you kind of an impact range in dollar value, which we then apply to our overall financial risk appetite. And we're able then to see what are the overall priorities. Data is the underlying source of that, and we created this field which inputs data into Elasticsearch, just starts to get the conversation going with different teams to have a topic or something that they're concerned about and want to complete a risk analysis. And then that's the start of a broader process that we also have in the Elastic Stack that drives all of our quantified risk. So this screenshot is an example of some of the outputs and showing kind of the impact range, potential financial impact range. This one here is just showing what is the overall impact of our top risks that we've analyzed. And so we see here that there's a pretty large difference between the first one and the one at the bottom of the chart. So we're going to focus our resources, focus our priorities on trying to mitigate that highest risk. And then we also do analysis on mitigation actions. So we look at, well, what if we make this change in our control? What if we implement this new control or this new visibility? What impact does that have? And so we also use that to prioritize not just where we focus, but also how we focus. And sometimes a mitigation will apply across multiple risks. So even if one risk doesn't go down too much or have a great impact, the overall impact might be pretty significant when you're applying that across 3 or 4 of the risk areas. And with a distributed environment, when we're looking at things like access management, access controls, have a pretty significant impact across the environment. Again, all of this underlying and being driven in the Elastic Stack. Vendor management, the vendors that Elastic uses for its business and to operate its business. As with many of you, we need to complete our vendor assessments, our vendor risk analysis. So this is driving the operational process of just understanding what vendors that we're using, working with finance, working with procurement to get the visibility into the vendors, tracking the operational process, what's expired, what's the risk level to the organization. So this is your standard vendor risk operational piece. And we tie that in a little bit more. I'll show you in a few slides. So moving into the vulnerability management, getting a bit more into kind of core information security activities. First and foremost, I'd say second only to what are your controls, what are the objectives that you want to achieve with your program. And most important is your asset inventory, understanding what you have in your environment, what do you need to protect, what does it look like, do you have the visibility. So we spent a lot of time figuring out what do we want the data model to look like, applying it to the Elastic Common Schema to bring that into the Elastic Stack and then have that asset inventory, then apply across continuous controls monitoring that I talked about. We'll have it all applied in the SIM, which I'll go into more details about that in a few minutes, and then a general browser. But it brings in not just technology assets, so things like S3 buckets, compute workloads, and hyperscaler environments. It's also any services, vendors, consider them assets for how we are operating our business, but also people. And so bringing in what are the people aspects of asset as well. So giving us a holistic picture of the overall environment. This is an example of something that we are working on and really starting to continue to tie all of the data together that we've had. So we've spent the last several years bringing in all of the information or making it available to the information security team, whether it's using cross-cluster search or just creating the service for the company to use. And so this is an example from a vendor perspective, looking to create, so we have that operations dashboard of just our assessments. This is more focused on how are we using that vendor, what alerts have we received, if we are receiving logs and activity analysis from that, applying machine learning, are there any outliers, is there something that we need to investigate, have we done a threat model, what is that, are there any risks associated with this vendor? So really trying to tie all of those pieces together that I have been talking about up to now. So core vulnerability management, the thing from a security perspective, we all would love it to go away, but it just keeps hanging on. From our perspective, we use Qualys as our overall vulnerability scanner, add some vulnerability intelligence from that based on a few different sources. And then the asset inventory is the third key input into that. So you run all of it, using our beats, pull the data into an Elastic Stack. And the Elastic Stack is where all of our engineers, all the rest of the organization access that data. One of the great things about that is if we ever decided to change from Qualys to a different vulnerability scanner, it would be seamless and wouldn't be any change to the users across the organization, because we have decoupled their processes and their work from the underlying technology that we're using. And then we've worked with each team using Tines to help us with the automation. How does each team want to receive the information? We don't just want to email them a massive Qualys report showing all the vulnerabilities. How do they operate? Some teams wanted information sent into Slack to create alerts. Some teams wanted direct integration with GitHub, where we create GitHub issues, and then they have automation behind that drives all of their changes. And some that are just really automating the entire process. And we are, on the vulnerability management side, more of a governance check, and they're just updating packages on their CI/CD pipelines as frequently as they come out. So this has been a big win just in the overall process and the visibility of the data across the environments, and really being able to have each team operate in the way that their team operates and not having to change just to achieve a certain security objective. So that's helped quite a bit. Now getting into the part that everyone really likes to talk about, all the security operations, threat management. So first, we use our Elastic Agent as our security endpoint. And so that's one piece of data that's running on all of our workstations. We're in the process of deploying that out across all of our cloud SaaS servers as well. And then from threat management, SOC analyst perspective, we are solely on Elastic Stack. So we're using our SIEM solution as our SIEM. Again, using Tines as automation, driving that out. Using the CTI platform for our threat intelligence. And then all across the bottom is where we're getting all of our sources. So we have over 100 data sources all coming in through one of these mechanisms. And then similarly, I talked about compliance as code. We also have created detections as code. And so we have hundreds, thousands of individual nodes, hundreds of clusters across the organization, and really leverage the power of cross-cluster search to be able to get visibility into significant amounts of data. So we're not having to copy and replicate that data just into a specific security data lake. So what that allows us with detections as code, instead of having to manually, or even just scripting detection rule updates and machine learning job updates, and having to do them manually all across, put them as code in GitHub, and then we've created a tool that puts them in the JSON format, pushes them out across to the cross-cluster search heads, and then it gets propagated out to the nodes. So that's something we've been talking with the product team. A lot of customers that we've talked to and kind of shared this approach have been really interested. So they're looking at how to incorporate that into the overall Elastic SIEM offering. So we can talk about that if anyone has any interest. And then using alert management, case management, detections, all the capabilities that the SIEM team has been building. So initially, when we first started deploying this and using the SIEM, we were using the Hive for case management because case management did not exist in the security solution. Now that it does, we've transitioned over. And we work very closely with the product team to just both give them feedback on features, functionality, things as practitioners we would really like to see, down to this button should be over here because from a workflow perspective, it's much more efficient to keep it over on this side. And the larger things as well. What are the capabilities that are just missing from the product that would greatly enhance the overall security capabilities, or say the visibility detection capabilities? More on our overall alerts and automation. From an analyst perspective, we don't want them to have to go to multiple screens, multiple dashboards to get all of the data points that they need to complete an investigation. So we use Tines as our operations workflow to pull out all of the context and data. We get it all from whether that's the InfoSec Elasticsearch clusters, if there's other clusters around the organization or other outside third-party services that we need to pull some information from, consolidate it all and put it into a Slack bot that gives that analyst that alert that says, all right, this alert fired, here's everything you need to investigate and go off and see what's happening and see if there's any further action that we need to take. And that has been a significant time saver for the analyst and not having to context switch and try to piece together all the information. So then in doing that investigation, if we need to trigger an event that we need further investigation and need to engage others across the organization to get answers. We, again, have a slot bot and automate the kind of response process. So all of the things from a response needs for saving the logs, backing it up, archiving the channel, providing the updates, all of that is automated based on some forms and some processes that our incident response team has derived. And similarly, it's been a significant time saver on all the after actions reports and the after event reporting. An example of the distributed alerting, so similarly with the continuous controls monitoring for security events. Say we use Okta, so if there's an Okta alert that this user signed in somewhere that they never signed in before, we can send an alert to that user, hey, is this you? And doing that in a bit of an out-of-band channel. If yes, it was them, all good, nothing happens. If it wasn't them, that's when it gets escalated to an analyst for more focused investigation. The overall goal is to take all of that more repetitive, manual, kind of level 1 SOC analyst work and automate that and really focus on the more interesting activities and investigations for our SOC analysts. Our threat management metrics, think of this from an operational perspective, just understanding what's the ebb and flow of volume, being able to see if we're potentially getting into some alert fatigue with our analysts, and use this to really understand if there's rules that need to be tuned. And so this gives us more of that operational visibility into how do we continue to improve and make the experience better for our analysts. So everything that I talked about that we've done, we have some blog posts on the Elastic website that you can go in and search through, talking about all of our distributed alerting, our vulnerability management, how we put together our asset management. And thank you very much.